Welcome. It's the top of the hour. Let's get started. Welcome everyone for joining the Wednesday's webinar. I'm Rajesh Kalidindi, dialing in from Seattle, Washington. On behalf of UXPA International, I would like to welcome again all of you for this webinar. If you don't know about UXPA International, let me quickly give you an introduction and then hand off to the presenter. UXPA International, for the last 35 years, has been serving the community to enable people who want to come in as a UX profession into the UX profession, or those who have been practicing the usability and user experience, enable them with resources to grow in their career. This is a member-owned organization, and many of our resources are free, including this today's webinar. We have a few other resources. Check it out: UXPA Magazine, Journal of Usability Studies, and many other blogs. Other material is also available. We also offer mentorship programs for those who want a dedicated coaching how to grow into their career. So this is a volunteer-driven organization, including me. I'm a volunteer for the last few years, more than a decade. And this is the only organization completely run by volunteers, a nonprofit organization for the UX professionals by the UX professionals. So with that introduction, I would like to hand off to Stephanie. Please take it from here.
Hello, welcome. While I share my screen, can you re-enable the transcript because apparently it's gone?
Yes, I enabled it.
Okay,
I used it now.
Let me double check. Do we have transcript? Okay, I'm not sure, but maybe monitor the chat to see if the transcript issue. No, it's okay. All good. Perfect. So, hello everyone. Welcome. I'm here today to talk about enterprise UX, and I need the next slide. So I'm Stephanie Walter. I'm a UX researcher and designer based in Luxembourg, a small country between France, Germany, and Belgium, if you don't know where it is. I have more than 15 years of experience working with agencies, universities, and today I'm a consultant. And I'm specialized in something that we call enterprise UX. So first, a little definition. What is enterprise UX? Enterprise UX means I design complex products and softwares that are used by internal employees for their daily work. Think about CRM, accounting software, project software, anything management, HR tools, inventory tools for big retailers, all of those. At some point, I worked for a client who was doing crane monitoring systems, so monitoring cranes on different areas on the world. So today I work in finance on a tool that is used by our end users to basically handle finance loans. I'm going to oversimplify a little bit because this business is very complex. So usually there's kind of two different kind of settings when you work in enterprise UX. Either you work internally within the company, which is my case, meaning we have an IT department and we have business users. Business users are the people who are doing the job. They are like the loan officer, the risk management people, lawyers, all of that. So everything you need in order to lend money to some people. And then we have IT department, and we are basically building softwares and tools for our internal employees. So that's one setting. That's how I work today. Another setting is you can work for a software as a service company, and then you will build tools for employees that will get sold as a package. Here again, a lot of different examples come to mind. I used to do that. I used to work for how can I explain that? A B2B2C product that was to help car dealerships streamline their relationship with end customers. So our customer were the car dealerships, and then they were using our tool to help with their own customers, who were people bringing cars to the dealership. So there's kind of both settings, and depending, it's sometimes a little bit different, because when you work internally and you build a tool for the employees, your users are usually your colleagues. When you work for a software as a service company, then your end users are your customers. So historically, enterprise product meant boring, ugly, hard to use. And it's something I often hear is like, why do you even work on this kind of product? It must be very, very difficult, very, very annoying, and also it's always ugly. So what can we actually do about that? I want to walk you through a project that we did for my current clients, which is the UX research and design process of this kind of giant employee tool. So I work for a bank, a giant one. And my team was basically rebuilding a whole tool that was built 18 years ago. So they built this tool 18 years ago, and a couple of years after that, we rebuilt the whole thing because of technical debt, but also because we were not able to evolve the tool anymore. So this tool is kind of a portal for more than 2,000 people at the bank, which means many, many, many different personas that have to do different tasks related to the action of lending money to a borrower. Again, oversimplifying a little bit. Imagine you go to a bank, you do a loan. Here, the same, but we loan to countries, we do loans to giant corporation, and there's a lot of more zeros than when you do a loan for a house. But it's kind of the same thing. You have finance people, you have people for risk, you have people to draft the contracts, all of that. So this giant tool is used by many different personas to do many different things. And the global point is it's following a loan throughout the whole process. So the first thing we did is, before even starting researching, we went and tried to find people to help us get familiar with the business process, the jargon. Like basically trying to understand any documentation I couldn't find about the current processes, the current systems, and how do people do things. So this is usually when you arrive in an enterprise setting, there's often already a lot of documentation available. So my advice is, if you arrive in a company and you have to build something for the employees internally, ask if they already have documentation about the current tool or the previous tools. Also, often in my field, we work with people we call business analysts. So I don't know if this is common or not. I've seen that a lot in Luxembourg, where you basically have a dedicated role of someone who will go to the business people and try to understand their processes and what they need. And then if it's a software as a service product, what I usually used to do is I would start talking to customer supports and sales to understand the product, but also often customer supports, they have tons of data about what is working, what is not working, what are the current customers complaining about. So before even starting to talk to the users, we try to understand kind of the global picture. Then on this specific project, we started with quantitative data. We had 400 pages to migrate. So we started with an analysis of the current pages. We didn't have any analytics tool installed at that time because GDPR, but also it's very hard to find an analytics tool that is not something that sends data outside of the company. So the only thing we had was server logs. So we went through the server logs and checked, okay, how often was this page visited in the last year? So it gave us kind of a top 30 of pages that we had to migrate in priority. We didn't know why people visited those pages, but we knew they visited them. And then we checked the content of those pages. So this took up a couple of weeks, but it's an example of a very small part of a giant Excel sheet where we had all the contents for every single page of this giant process. So we had the name in the navigation detail. So my screen, it says 4 columns table, 4 columns table, list of tables, 2 columns table, calendar, more table, table, table. So I work for a bank, so of course most of my content is table. But the goal was to say, okay, what does the current content look like? And also in the notes, we were deciding already, do we have duplicate content or not? What happens with this tool is that you had many people request many different pages into many different places through all the 18 years. And at some point, we discovered that half of the content was duplicated content. So you would have one information in one page and the exact same information in another page because of the way how can I say, the environment is siloed. Some people were like, this is my page. I want to see this content on my page. And other people were like, this is also another page is mine. I want to see the same content. So the first kind of big work here was actually information architecture, making sure we streamline on the content and we stop having it duplicated in many different pages. So we got the as is. We got okay, we have the top 30 pages. We know what was in those pages. We didn't know why they were visited it and how they were visiting it. So here is when we started actually doing user research. And I was talking to a colleague today, and he reminded me that over the course of 3 years, we kind of interviewed 250 users for this project. I was like, oh, yeah, I forgot we talked to that many people. So it's not always easy to get access to internal users. What I started doing is I making friends with different departments. And also I started getting closer a little bit to the support teams. Because again, support people are usually the front line when you don't have access directly to the users. So it's usually easier to start there. Um, we managed eventually to get 1 user, 2 users. So to increase the number of users we were talking to, at the end of each interview, we asked the users for referrals. We went like, okay, was super interesting talking to you. Do you think there's a colleague that has valuable information that we should totally talk to? And please put us both in an email, like please send an introduction. So this is how we kind of organically grew the user base. We had a couple of them and then just asked for referrals. The cool thing in enterprise setting is you are working with people who have to work with the tool on a daily basis. So they're usually quite happy to help improve the tool. They might not always have the time. So for instance, my colleague at the moment has some user research to do, and she knows that during the whole summer, the people will be on holidays, so there's no time for them. So she'll have to wait until September, but still, she has access and she knows that in September she'll be able to continue the research. So we ended up building a community of our users. So we had the names, we have the champions, so that we could involve them in different research sessions continuously. A couple of methods that we used. So on my screen, I have a little framework that is the paper version, but we also have the digital version of that. So we kind of built this little framework where a lot of the things that we do in enterprise is very task oriented. Today, I need to do this. Tomorrow, I need to do that. So we frame the user research around what type of tasks and activities do you need to do in order to bring a loan to the bank, for instance. So the framework is around what do they do? Activities. We ask them, how do you do that? Like, what action, decision do you need to take in order to accomplish that? We try also to understand the dependencies. Like, are there other people you need? Are there other systems that you need? What are you dependent on? And then list all the tools, because often in order to do something, they will have to use multiple systems, and at some point you want those systems to communicate. And then we explore needs and frustrations. So we have the pain points, which is what is the most frustrating things. And then the last one that I really like is the magic wand. So the magic wand question is, if you had a magic wand, what would you change to make this activity easier for you? So we are a little bit in the wishful thinking, but also framing it as a magic wand helped a lot, because then we could tell people like, don't bother about technical feasibility. If you could change something, what would it be? Because often, technically, your users are your colleagues. So sometimes they know that they want something, but IT said it was not possible. So we wanted to kind of avoid this, oh, I would like to have that, but we know it's not possible, and say, you know what? If everything was possible, what would you want? And from that, we also kind of gathered a lot of interesting things, because then they were thinking beyond whatever they had today. So, a couple of questions I use a lot in the context of enterprise UX, because my interviews are very task-oriented. So I've developed this framework where I have questions and follow-up cards, and those are the top 6 I use the most when I do user research with enterprise users. So tell me about, very open question. Tell me about a time where you were late for a deadline. What happened? I also really like the walk me through the steps you do to do something. So here I'm asking the person to really guide me through step by step. Often I would also ask them to share a screen. If they do those steps in a system, I would be like, oh, fine, please open the system, walk me through, show me, etc. And then show me how you do something is also another one that is interesting. What are all the things you need to know, to do and know in order to accomplish this task? So this is interesting, because here we are investigating the knowledge gap. Because sometimes people will do something once or twice a year. So they don't remember how to do the stuff. If you do something once or twice a year with a system, you are going to need more guidance. So this kind of knowledge gap investigation is quite interesting. Please recall a situation when you, what did you do? And then the last, again, the magic wand. If you had the magic wand, what would you change? So my advice here, during the interview session, we went all over the place. Sometimes we started to talk about whole complete topics. What I would advise you to do is take note of those. Try to bring back the user on the topic of your interview, but still, if they're exploring something interesting, take notes and then keep it and document it. Because what happened is, we did some research for one topic and then another one and then another one. And eventually, the topic that was off topic for the first research became the topic of the third one. So, for instance, at the moment, we are talking about what goes on the homepage, and people will talk about notification and how confusing they are, and they cannot really have control over notification. It's not the topic of the homepage, but I would still take notes, because I know that next year we are opening the Pandora box of having a page where you can actually fine-tune your own notifications. So data is always interesting, and even though it's not interesting for your current topic, keeping it in mind, and also maybe taking note of the name of the user for your next research, going, oh yeah, that guy, we talked about notification. When I open the Pandora box, I'm definitely gonna back to that person. So that's also very important. And then another thing I discovered is, shockingly, people are not used to user-centered design process or anything user-centered really. So during the research, I often had users expressing solutions instead of expressing needs. And then you become this very cliche person who asks why 5 times, because you want to understand why they need to do that. So to give you an example, I was showing something to a user and they were like playing around with the screen, and at some point they saw this table. So it was a table with all the operation of the bank. And then she goes, I need an export to Excel button. Okay. Then I was like, okay, why? No, actually, I asked her, you don't have an Excel export to Excel button. So what would you do today? So she goes, she basically copies the whole table from the browser. Then she opens an Excel and she pastes it. And then I was like, okay, no, what? What are you doing with this in Excel? And she goes into like this column that says status, and she just removes all the operations that are not currently active. So she said she needed an export to Excel because the annoying part for her was to copy paste in Excel. What she actually wanted or actually needed was not to export to Excel. It was just the way she was doing it, the workaround. What she wanted is, I don't want to see the inactive, pending, caduc operation on my screen. I just want to see the active ones. So what we ended up doing is we ended up having an export to Excel on other pages. Let's face it, we work at the bank. They want to export to Excel. But for this specific one, we brought in browser filters directly on the tables. So it sounds very obvious when you show that. Remember, the old interface was built 18 years ago. At that time, having something that looks like an Excel with filters on columns inside a table in a browser was not something that you used to do. So here, she said she wanted an export to Excel, but she really needed filtering directly in the tables. So based on all of those sessions with the end users, we ended up having a lot to do. So how do you make sure you do the stuff properly in the right order? We ended up having to define priorities. So on the top of my screen, I have the Excel sheet from my colleague, where for every single kind of opportunity for improvement, feature, thing we wanted to bring, we discussed and we gave 4 grades. The first grade was business relevance. How important is it for the business? The second one was how important is it for the user? The difference being sometimes something is not super important for the user, but very important for the business. When it comes to avoiding errors or risk management, for instance, for the user, it should be transparent. So they're like, yeah, whatever. For the business, is very important. So we would give a rating for the business value and the user value. And then we would estimate how long it would be to develop and how long it would be to design, actually, and how long it would be to develop. And in kind of mathematically build this little matrix where we ended up having things that are high value, easy, were the top priority. This is what you want to do first. Then things that were super complex and super low, nah, maybe later, but not right now. Things that were high value for the users and a little bit complex, priority number 2. Things that were easy but not high value, priority number 3. So in the end, we had this kind of fast tracks, so the things that we could do without having to go back to the users. And then we had big topics where we were like, okay, we need more user research on that. So the fast tracks were like content, small features, mostly UI design, where you want to organize the content on the screen. So for that, we use the design system to migrate. We would sometimes go back to a couple of users, just show them the mockup for feedback, and that was it. Or we would gather more feedback when the fast track feature was developed. So this is the stuff where we were pretty confident about and didn't want to invest more time into user research. So that the time we were invested on the user research and like really building prototypes and doing usability testing session was on the high big topic. So for the big topics, one of them, for instance, was how will the search function? Like we have a gigantic search where people can search for a lot of things in the database. This was I think, 4 months of user research just to understand what people expect from that. So for those big topics, first, I told you I was noting everything down. So I checked in the previous research session, do I have information about this topic? Let's start with that. Then I would schedule follow-up session with the users for this specific topic. We would iterate on different design solutions and then run usability testing. So today it depends. Sometimes we do usability testing on Figma prototypes. At that time, for this part of the project, we were still using Axure because we didn't have Figma basically. And sometimes we do usability testing session on something that is developed when it's something that the developer can have a prototype that is developed pretty quickly. So one piece of advice is when we were doing some usability testing session with Figma prototype, the mockup were so pixel perfect that some people thought it was the final solution. So during the moderated session, it was okay because we start the session, we explain to the user that it's not the real thing, it's a bunch of screens glued together. They can click on some, but there will not be real interaction like typing, all of that. So we thought, okay, that's fine. This backfired because at some point, one of the prototype leaked. So on my screen, I have an example of a rich text editor, which is a feature that we have when people want to type text and they want to have bold, italic, etc., etc. So the prototype leaked, and apparently over 3 days, um, users sent the prototype to other users, and people started trying to interact with the prototype, but they didn't have the warning. They didn't have the, hey, this is just, it's just a couple of images. It's not working. So 3 days after, I had a gigantic email with tons of feedbacks on how the regex editor wasn't working. I was like, okay, fine, but it's not supposed to. It's a Figma prototype. So bottom line, be super careful. At some point, if you give a link to someone and you tell them not to share it, do not trust them. So no, I'm destroying the links after the session to avoid that. But yeah, it's basically one of those situations where people are not used to testing things in almost realistic prototypes. So sometimes you need to manage expectations. We still work in Agile, so we can build a beta version very quickly. So that's the really cool part. So what we would do is once we have a beta version, we would do one-to-one observational usability testing session. So usually when you do usability testing session, you give specific tasks to users. Here, you have to understand that depending on the month of the year, the day of the week, or the department where they are, the user will do something completely different. So the main guidance we had for that was please try to do whatever you needed to do with the old tool, but use the new one instead. And from there, we would just observe and ask questions. That was kind of our main task, basically. And then what happened is a couple of users said, oh, actually, this is quite nice. Can I keep using it for the next couple of weeks and give you feedback? So this is how we ended up running some user diary studies. So to the people who wanted to keep the prototype, but also to the other ones, we said, yeah, of course. So we gave them access to the beta version that was plugged to real data. And we gave them an Excel sheet as a diary study. And we told them, okay, try to work with that. Whenever something is not working in the new tool and you had to open the old one, please log a line in this diary study. So we ask what they were trying to do, how often do they need to do it, what pages they were trying to visit, what stopped them from doing what they were trying to do. Again, how might we make this better in the future? Sometimes they were giving feedback, or sometimes they were just putting some screenshots. And then the last columns were not given in the Excel sheet. It was for us, once we gathered the Excel sheet back, we were organizing this by type. Is it a usability problem, an improvement, and then gravity to be able to, again, make sure that we prioritize that. So basically, we gave them access to a beta version and we gave them this little diary study. And I was surprised by how many of them I collected. And I'm still surprised, like last time I did a diverse study, I collected among all the users, so 20 users over 2 months, I had 200 entries to analyze. And we are doing that again in July on a new project where basically users will have access to a beta version. We kind of prepared a couple of tasks for them to do to guide them a little bit more this time, but it will be the same idea. They will have the whole summer to play around with the beta version, do the tasks, and whenever they have an issue, a problem, something is not working, or even if they just have a question, they can record it in the diary study, and then we collect them back at the end. The idea of that is often they test whenever they want to test. So this way they can do it on their own time. And of course, we are here. If they have any question, we have a dedicated chat group with them. But often they like to do things on their own. So the Excel sheet format is kind of the best we found for them. So here what I learned is in place with low UX maturity, usability testing sessions sometimes get used for change management. Meaning I had users come to a usability testing session just because they are assistants and they want to know what is being developed because their boss asked them. I had people who asked if they can take notes during their own usability testing session and if they can share the screenshot because they also want their whole unit or department to give feedback. I also have those kind of users who are not used to being in control. They used to seeing demos. So when you say, okay, no, I'm giving you the URL, you do the stuff, they would go like, where do I click? What does this button do? So what can you do when you have such people? First, I embrace the one who wants to share with their team and find more feedback. I try to facilitate it. So either I offer to come to do a small presentation to their units, show the mockup myself, or I will put the mockup in a place where they can gather the feedback, like a FigJam or a PDF where they can comment. For the people not used to the usability testing session, I have usually follow-up questions. When someone will go like, oh, what does it do if I click on this button? I would answer something like, why don't you try? Click on the button then. Or what do you expect this button to do? Something like that. So the goal is always to shift it back to, okay, I'm not the one answering the question. What do you expect from this? And then I always plan time for the usability session, at least 10 minutes at the end, so that if they had specific question that we could not address, that we can just do a Q&A session. So here, I used to work in academics, and in academics, you were very, very strict about following the protocol, all of that. In enterprise, it's your colleagues. So if they have a question about something, of course, you're not going to answer it during the testing session because you don't want to bias them. But it's perfectly fine to say, I cannot answer you, but I will take note and we'll circle back to that question at the end. Something like that. Okay, so that was about my projects. And now let's talk a little bit about what I learned, like the things I wish I knew sooner about enterprise UX and our users. The first one is complex business require complex interfaces. Don't oversimplify it. You see those LinkedIn posts where people go before, after, and the before has ton of data and the after has no data anymore. They're like, yay, better UX. No, you're not improving users' life by hiding stuff and oversimplifying things. If they need the thing, they need the thing to work. So that's our previous advanced search, which had, I don't know how many fields. I was hoping to get rid of most of them. In the end, we almost had to migrate all of those fields because there's a reason why people need all of those fields. So what we ended up doing is the content is here for a reason. You are still allowed to question it. So we were asking, okay, after 10 years, does this filter still make sense? Some at the bottom of the screen were not even bringing any results. So we were like, but look, you have a filter, but the number of results is 0. So this filter, maybe it's something you used to need, but you don't really need it anymore. So we were not questioning how and why, but we still try to say, okay, does it still make sense after so many years? And is there a way to better display it without throwing the complexity directly at everyone? So the advanced search now is kind of a choose your own adventure thingy where we have default filters, status, progress, and a couple of them that I had to anonymize. And then we have this choose filter where we have almost everything that used to be in the old interface and people can choose. So when they come back, we persist this, meaning if they display the filter before, if they come back to the advanced search, we will still display this filter. We don't keep the value. So if you come back, you don't have anything filtered out in status and countries, but we still have them in here. And the idea is to say, okay, we did user research to understand what were the most used filters. And then for the other one, we organize them. You can search for a filter that you want to add to the page so that people who really, really need this filter, they still have it, while still trying to not over-complexify the interface for the majority of the people who only need 4 or 5 filters. So it's not about completely removing features, but you are allowed to present them in a way to reduce the cognitive load to avoid having kind of this thing that was scaring a lot of people. Um, Another thing is, in a lot of places, I see designers, but also sometimes business analysts, try to build their ideal flow and force it onto the user. And this cannot work because your users are used to working in a certain way and they have a mental model. If you force a flow onto them, you will basically go against the way they work. So my advice here is again, start with the business process, understand it, see how it can be improved where it can be, and then build your process, your flow, your screen around that. So really start with the business, understanding the business need and the user needs. Then we often hear designing is about taking decision. If you let the user decide, you failed as a designer. Yeah, except that in tools that people use on a daily basis and with that many different user types, a lot of people will want different things. So here I would say it's okay to let users sometimes take decisions. So we ended up bringing a lot of customization options, either because we had different personas and they wanted different things on the screen. So 80% of the screen was the same and then 20% was customized, or because the same persona, again, depending on what they have to do today, is interested in something or something else. So, for instance, we have officers. Sometimes they're interested into the dates, if they are checking if the operation is on track. And at the end of the month, they're like, oh, I need to do reporting on the money. So at the end of the month, they will go like, today I'm interested into the money in the amount, not in the dates. So we ended up doing something like that where they have a portfolio of operation at the bank and they can choose the different column they want to display. And here again, this was a lot of user research where we went to a lot of people to talk to them. And a lot of them actually had an Excel sheet to do exactly that. So I have a collection of, I don't know how many different Excel sheets from different people to understand how they work. And then what we ended up doing is whatever you had as a setting on this page, if you leave the page and you come back, you have it exactly the way you had it before. And the last thing is, for some of those filters, they are as URL parameter, meaning you can set up this whole page and send it to a colleague, and they will see the same thing. So that's also something they were super happy about, because then they could kind of share the way this works. People need most of the data, so hiding things to make it pretty is not an option. I've seen that a lot, where people are like, yeah, but the name is super long, it's ugly, we want, how can I say, sleek design. We will just cut the last part of the name and that would work. It's the first thing that user complain about. Like my developer did that. There were names that couldn't fit because they were too long. They would just put the beginning of the name of the operation and truncate. The first thing the user says like, no, you cannot truncate it. We need the full names, which makes sense because sometimes you have multiple things that have the same name at the beginning of the name, and then just like the two last character is what is letting them know which is which. So operation name nanana A, operation name nanana B. The difference is the A of the B. It's at the end, so you cannot snip stuff. We ended up building a lot of mechanism though, where if we had giant content that was user-generated content, we would have a way to show more or show less. So for instance, project description in our database is not limited, meaning a user can put 2 lines and another user is going to put 100 lines. We need a component, which is information for this project, to kind of be consistent. So what we ended up doing is having a lot of show more, show less in places where we know that this is going to be user-generated content to accommodate everyone and to accommodate every length. And then people work with the data. So don't block copy-paste. Again, it sounds obvious, but I've seen a lot of systems that would block copy-paste it in the browser. And then also they want to extract and share the content. So we ended up building a lot of things like export to Excel features, export to PDF, because at some point they need this content to get out of our system and they need to do math with it, or they want to print it because they're going to be on a plane and they want have data or something like that. Another thing we try to do is we try to make collaboration easier. So for instance, at some point you have a team of people, and what we ended up creating is a feature that a lot of the assistants especially loved, which is email whole team. So when you click on email whole team, we have a little piece of HTML that is creating a mail too. So we take all the people in the team, we already pre-fill the mail. We put the ones that are not contact persons, so other involved, we put them in CC. The subject is pre-filled is the name of the operation, and then we already pre-filled the please find here the link to the operation with the link. So here we already started an email for you, and then you just have to fill the blanks, explain why you want to email the whole team, something like that. And then users don't care about what data goes into what tool in your IT ecosystems, but they will count the number of clicks. So let's pretend my project name is Prometheus. In this system, we were retrieving data from, I don't know, 6 or 7 other systems. One of the biggest user complaints was to say, look, if I find something in your system and it exists in another one, I want a link that sends me to the exact same item in the other system. Don't send me to the homepage of the other system. So for instance, we have financial counterparts. They exist in different systems. We did some links from our system that opens the exact same item to the other system, etc. So we really try to retrieve the data from other systems and make them communicate also. But the goal is really to make users' life easier so they don't have to search for the same information in multiple systems. And then something that was asked a lot is, again, automated data retrieval across the systems to avoid copy pasting. And this, we are still not super good at it because it's technically complex, especially when sometimes you have data in some systems, sometimes data is in some Word documents. So you start having to go through a lot of loops. But here is also where we are currently thinking about using AI to help us retrieve those sort of things. So it's the idea to say, have an assistant that can say, okay, get me this data in this other system, bring it here, to make it easier for the user to parse all the information in all the system of the bank. And then when it comes to change management, I learned that training is expected, but in many different forms. So I have a spectrum of users who go from I do not want any training, let me play with the tool on my own, to I will not click on a button unless someone told me exactly what this button will do. Giant spectrum. So we had to offer different formats of training. So we had live session where they could just register and come and ask questions. We brought this concept of happy hours, which was a session every week where they could just come and discuss with us. We have video training. We have FAQ training in PDF for people who prefer to read. We have a newsletter where there's quick tips. And then, of course, there's also like phone support and ticket opening. So there's a lot of different ways to accommodate all the training and support need to the people to make sure that they get it in the format that they want. I want to reiterate in when the business is complex, training doesn't mean your interface isn't good. I think we've all seen that on a t-shirt. The interface is like a joke. If you have to explain it, it's not that good. I am sorry for the author, but this quote is making my life miserable because I have people who use it to say, yeah, but you need to make the interface good enough so users don't need training. I was like, they don't need training on the interface, but they need prior business knowledge to understand the interface. Like if I gave you the interface that we have today, you would not be able to do things because you don't know how the process of creating a loan at the bank works. You wouldn't even know what half the acronyms in there mean. So I would like to amend this and go, an interface is like a joke. Like any good joke, you might need some prior knowledge, business knowledge, to understand it. Doesn't make it a bad joke or a bad interface. If I were to make a joke about Schrodinger's cat, if you don't know anything about quantum physics, you would not understand the joke. It doesn't mean it's a bad joke. It just means you don't have the context. You don't have the quantum physics knowledge to understand it. So yeah, in the end, also remember training sessions are actually a place where you can meet the users. So what I ended up doing is I was also going to the training session and gathering the feedback. Like I was writing down first user impression and whatever question they had also during those training, because again, it was more user data that I had access to. So in the end, working in enterprise UX can feel overwhelming. Complexity is scary. You will arrive in a place where on the first day, there will be a lot of stuff you won't understand. There will be jargon, there will be a lot of complex things and a lot of parts. Often, it's overwhelming. So here is my very honest design process. First, complexity. I think we need to acknowledge the fear. Like, acknowledge that you're scared. Like, how am I supposed to design that? It's scary. Then we do analysis. We ask for help, business help, to make sense of the complexity. And then we start kind of, and tangling a little bit this kind of giant ball of mess. We start seeing the strings. Then we bring in user research. We bring another piece of the puzzle and we understand a little bit better what we're supposed to do, how we might display things. And then we arrive at the solution design. So eventually, after all of those runs, everything click in place and we can start designing a solution. So there's a lot of improvement and opportunities in enterprise UX. We need designers desperately. So I hope I convince you that it's a nice area to work in. So we can go to the questions.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for sharing your experience in designing complex enterprise applications. It's not that easy. Before getting into the questions, two things I wanted to share with you. Number one, please save your date, September 25th, for online virtual conference. It's called UX Palooza. We are bringing more interesting topics on the intersections of UX and AI. Please save the date. And then any sessions like this, all of our resources, time to time, we will share through our newsletter. Please sign up for the newsletter. But if you don't want to get emails from us, you can follow us on LinkedIn. We will share all of our offerings. If you wish to sign up for as a speaker, you can do that as well. So now I would like to hand off to Stephanie for questions.
Yay. I will take them one by one then. So the first question, when the content was duplicated, were there different audiences or visible in different parts of the user journey? Did you further explore the duplicated content? Could most of the content be consolidated in one place or not, and why? So I don't know why the content was duplicated. My hunch is that you had different people come to IT at different moments, and some developer change, and they were not even aware that this content was in another page, but because it was 400 pages. So in the end, we killed all the duplicated contents. And we kind of went into here is the new structure with all the content mods, and we go live and wait for people to complain that some pages were missing. And honestly, there's a page we never migrated. It was 80% duplicated, and I was expecting someone to complain, and no one complained. So in the end, I'm convinced that in those 400 pages, there were a ton of pages that were not used anymore, and we managed to basically kill a lot of the duplication by just migrating it once, and then whatever people didn't complain about was never migrated. It's a very radical solution, but it still works. So, have you had issues during a shared Excel spreadsheet for user diary access conflict data going missing? Have you considered using a dedicated tool for entering, tracking, analyzing rather than a shared Excel spreadsheet? We didn't have issues. We gave the user group the choice. Some user groups working in the same area of the bank decided they wanted to have a shared diary because they didn't want to duplicate the entries. For the other ones, we didn't have a shared diary. Each user had their own Excel sheets, and then I collected them and I had to manually put everything into a big one. But no, we didn't have any access conflict data going missing. People are used to working in Excel and don't overwrite stuff, so it was okay. We considered using another tool, so my colleague ended up trying to have a form that was filling an Excel, but in the end, people prefer the Excel sheet. So I swear I tried. I offered to have a PowerPoint, I offer anything, and I was like, no, Excel is fine. But I work at the bank. So maybe in other places they would prefer to have a form. I have a whole session on user diary studies, specifically how we did that if you're interested. But yeah, like the reason for the Excel sheet is basically because this is the format our end user were most comfortable with. If you ever do that, I would say check what your user want as a format and try to accommodate. Can you talk about when improvement to pain points involve both improving the screen to support current business process and revising business processes in self and not that how that played out? Are you recommending business process improvements or working with an operation consultant? If business process change is proposed, how does this impact scope of UX work? We actually had that on a new project where they completely changed the business process and we had to implement new business processes in a new tool. It was a mess because people were not happy about the new business processes that were way more strict than the old one. But since we changed the process and the tool, and the visible part of the iceberg was the tool, they complained a lot about the tool. And what I have now is in the usability session summary for those, I have a specific section dedicated to this is all the issues with the current business process that our users reported to us. And we took all of those issues and we went to the people who could, if they wanted, change the business processes. And now it's in their hand. So on my side, if users report business process issues, there is nothing I can do about that because I'm not the owner of the business process. But I can report it back and then hope that the owner of the business process will listen to those users and change and improve. This happened a lot, honestly, where we reported something and then a couple of months after that, they came back to us like, okay, we agree on improving the business process. No, like improve the screen with this new business process. So it takes time. So you're not going to change it in 2 days. Sometimes it takes 6 months, but yeah, it happens. And then we are basically like bouncing back between business process improvement and change screen, and then we retest the screens. Oh. If user A shares a screen with user B, then user B alters the interface to send the new UI back to user A. Does user A get the new interface created by user B? Our users don't change interface. They can customize it, and then the customization stays for their own user, or they can share the URL with the customization, and then this becomes the last state of the screen that user visited, so this stays for them. That's it. So they are not like altering the interface for another one, definitely. Also, in the future, we will have a feature on some of the screens where they will be able to save views. So this happens because, again, sometimes users to do things, two things, and depending on the thing they do, the content of the table is not the same, but it's still 80% the same. So they want to be able to save the views. So then we'll see if they want to share those views or not. When data is updated in any linked database, does it get automatically updated in all related systems? Yes, but not always. How can I say that? Some data is one-to-one. You update in system one, you go in system B, and you refresh, it's updated. Except for some financial data that gets recalculated twice a day, from what I remember. And then wherever we display this financial data that gets recalculated multiple days a day because of exchange rates, for instance, then in these places, there's a little banner that says this data was updated on that time. So it depends. Most of the time, we strive for synchronization, but sometimes it's not technically possible. And when not technically possible, we inform the user about the freshness, let's say, of the data, if that makes sense. How well does interactive training versus pop-up guides driver JS in the application itself work? I have no idea what driver JS is. So I don't know. It's John. If you're still around, do you want to explain in the chat or take the mic? Because I don't understand the question. Can we unmute? Maybe I can. I don't know if I can unmute you. I cannot. Ah, yeah, it worked. We lost John.
Let's go to the next question, Stephanie, if
Okay.
John is unable to speak.
I might and might not understand a Schrödinger structure. Okay, this one is awesome. I hope you understand quantum physics. So it was I might and might not understand a Schrödinger's cat joke at the same time. If you have time after, I will explain. But it's a good joke. Any possibility of a master knowledge database where all changes are pushed out of all related systems? Again, not sure I understand the question, Jacqueline. So if you want to specify in the chat, maybe. How do you set documentation process? Uh, Depends. Documenting what? Design system, component, user research. I'm not sure how to answer that. It would be an hour of answer. But basically, documenting user research, we have a shared folder in the system, and then for documentation of components, UI, we document in Figma. Short answer. How important was it that your team was responsible for conduct UX strategy, UX design, UI design, UX research, new user training session, etc.? Very important, I would say, because I'm not sure how we would have built the stuff if we didn't do that. Because the only interface was built without any designers, only developers and a couple of business requirements. And we ended up with 400 pages with a lot of duplicate content and users saying the old interface was crap. While the new one, we had amazing feedback. So very important, I would say. Yeah. So driver.js is a JavaScript tool package using user input. You can highlight display pop-up with more information. Okay, I get it. So the question is about when you arrive on a screen for the first time and you see this little thingy like a tutorial that goes through the whole interface. Okay, so this one we haven't put it in place, but we are going to maybe try it in the future. I know there is another project at the bank where they put it in place and it's kind of 50-50. A lot of people skip it because they don't care. And it's still useful for other people. So for me, I would say try it with your own users and then record how often people click skip. If you see that too many people skip it, it's either they don't care or it's poorly implemented or it doesn't arrive at the right time. So we'll test it in the future, maybe. How do you manage users that show resistance to change? Depends on the users. So we've been doing a lot of cuddling, meaning they can come ask question anytime. We try to reassure them. We've been doing a lot of pushing from the hierarchy to explain why the new tool is better. And they had, I think it was 6 months. So they had 6 months while they were able to use the old interface and the new one. And they could give us feedback as to why they still preferred the old one. So basically a 6-month transition period where they could choose, but at the end we cut access to the old one. And I don't think that many people complain. So at the end of the day, they will have to use the new interface, but we are still trying to give them time to get used to it. And then again, the whole change management here is a giant talk on its own, but we had a lot of champions where we were counting on some users to also train other users. And strangely, when one user hates the new interface, but there's 10 people around him telling, but no, look, that's really cool. And look, this is a new feature. And look, this feature is actually right. Often they tend to follow the flow. So we have something that is both good and bad, which is hive mind in certain areas. So if we have one person who really likes something, they will push it, then the other will follow. If we have one person who really hates something, they will push the other people to hate it. So we also try to identify those kind of champions that were helping us push the new solution, and it helped a lot, basically. So how would you adapt your process into an environment where they expect results or solution way sooner, like 3 weeks, for instance? Um, I would say explain the risk. So if you have 3 weeks to design a full solution and then develop it and push it into production, then the risk is a lot of rework. I have an amazing chart in some of my slides. It's mostly about accessibility, but it's basically saying that if you catch issues early in the design phase, it's okay. If you catch the issues, problems in development phase, it costs 6 times more. If you catch them once it's in production, it's potentially 100 times more. So the cost of rushing and then having to change the stuff later because the stuff that you were rushed into doesn't work is going to be super expensive. So usually I explain that to people. But I'm a consultant, so at the end of the day, if they still want to rush, what I usually do is I document it. I document the thing I'm not happy about, I document the risks, and then at some point, when you have problems later, I can go back and say, okay, you see, next time maybe give us a little bit more time, and then gradually we are trying to get more and more time. I will try to finish. There's still two questions. Ah, no, all good. Okay, that's it for the Q&A. Did I miss anything?
No, I think you got everything, Stephanie. That was really great.
Yay!
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for joining this session. Please watch out for the next webinar's announcement. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.